So my wife and I, we were married right out of college. We were hippies and in love and got married. And we were thinking, like, how do we go overseas? If we want to go overseas, how to do it? There's a variety of paths. There's like the whole State Department scene. You take a really hard test and you prove that you're really smart, and then you get to work for our government overseas. At that point, I was really anti-U.S. government. That was not an option for me. Peace Corps is a really cool option, but I really wanted to do peace work. Conflict resolution kinds of work was really what I wanted to do. And Peace Corps has no peace work. Peace Corps volunteers are not actually allowed to live in conflict zones, and most of them were evacuated from rough areas after 9/11. So I was like, I don't want to do Peace Corps. So we looked around for quite a while thinking, what's the best path? UN, you need a master's degree, and we were just fresh out of undergrad wanting to experience. So we found this organization called the Mennonite Central Committee. And it's this group, they're Mennonites, and they basically practice nonviolence. And some of them are like anti-electricity and really like far out there, and then other ones are just sort of like generally Christian with this emphasis on peace and nonviolence. So we found this organization. They basically said that you could volunteer for 3 years, and they would cover your costs. You wouldn't be rich. We made $62 a month, but we didn't have any costs. And so we were able to volunteer for 3 years. So we signed up to go with them, and we were both at the time educators. Still in education. And they said, we'll hook you up with like a rural school district. My wife's a music teacher, so she was super psyched to kind of do collaborative music projects over there. And then I was going to do peace work, whatever the hell that means. And so we went over there, and we were in this really rural area. So they placed us in this kind of really conflict-prone zone. There's the northern Uganda, which was having a total civil war. The time we were there, about 2 million people were displaced, living outside of their homes in these camps. They're called IDP camps, internally displaced people's camps. And they were all over northern Uganda. People were not living out in rural northern Uganda. It was a war zone, and you were going to be abducted by the Lord Jesus' army if you were out there. Or you were also subject to the military coming and bothering you too. So people lived in these concentrated camps where they couldn't practice agriculture and they depended on the UN food program. So we were right kind of on the border of that. Plus, there was UN camps for people from Eastern Congo, people from Sudan, and still Rwandese. I mean, this is 10 years out from Rwanda, and there were still a lot of Rwandese in the camps. And the area where we were, remember, was the Banyoro, and the Banyoro had been utterly decimated by the British. So there was all this empty, sort of vacant land, which was rainforest. It was beautiful. But the government had decided this was a great place to put all the refugees. Because the Banyoro were so few in population, there was much more open land, theoretically, than other places. So the UN and the government came in and basically started clear-cutting a lot of rainforest to place refugees, which brought up another interesting ethical dilemma. The impact of refugees on an ecosystem. And I think if you've studied international affairs, this is kind of a big topic, especially a lot of the big camps in Ethiopia just decimated local environments. Firewood collection alone is enough to destroy a local environment. Plus, if you need to cut down forests to practice agriculture. So we were placed there, and we were in the school district. We lived kind of on a school compound, and we were placed working for the school district. And there was like 9 or 10 schools in our district, high schools. And of course, at that point, Uganda had universal primary education through 3rd grade. Everything after that you had to pay. So our school was definitely one of the poorest high schools in Uganda, but it wasn't the poorest people because you had to have some money to be able to go to high school. A lot of the kids we had, the UN would pay their school fees, so they could be there if they were on the UN's dime. Or then a lot of them also worked in like some multinational corporations that had sugar cane plantations, coffee plantations. Their parents would work there. People who were just straight up peasant farmers, no chance of going to high school. It's just unaffordable. So we were there, and the first thing we came across, all right, I'm looking to do peace work, and there's this extraordinary ethnic tension in these schools. Then the thing that strikes you right away is the discipline code. The discipline code in Uganda was shocking at first. When you're sort of this somewhat liberal, progressive Western person, and you come to Uganda, and you're like, I want to make it more peaceful. And the first time you see a student late for class, what do you think happens? You've heard the stories? The teacher will break a stick off a tree, take the 18 or 20-year-old boy or girl out in front of all their peers and beat them with a stick 10, 15 times on the ass. Like, seriously, just beat them with the stick. And of course, this is shocking to me. And the first time you see a almost an adult. Because high school there is a little bit later in life because, you don't start school until you're 7 or 8. So you're seeing a young adult being beaten by their teacher, a female. A young female student, 13, 14, 15 years old, being beaten by a big adult teacher. Maybe for being a minute late to class, maybe for not having a pencil. And so this was sort of the first thing. So, obviously I start thinking, okay, I have 3 years to make an impact for peace in Uganda. How do I even start addressing this? So I started talking to my friends about it. And the first thing they say is, this is the African way. This is how we do it. Your liberal Western societies having poorly behaved children. That's that. This is how we do it. What would you guys say? They've seen MTV. They know how our children act.
Just introduce other ways to encourage good behavior, like maybe positive initiatives instead of these harsh negative punishments.
But you have no money, no resources for anything positive. Because I said that. I was like, can't we do something more positive? Like what? Kids eat cornmeal and beans 2 meals a day. There's no, the only thing you get on Easter, the government bought us a cow. So the kids could all have meat for a day. It's like there's very little positive you can bring in. What about this argument? This is the African way. That's your liberal Western way. This is how we do it.
Well, that's valid, but isn't there something to be said for humanity? I mean, across all cultures, the more humane process?
Yeah, I think so. My Ugandan friends didn't tend to think that was very compelling. What they would say is, if you really, if we don't do this, we're going to end up with children who don't have our culture. This is how we instill our culture, our values, our beliefs, our mores, our ethics. We instill it this way, and they have respect for their elders. In America, I hear you put your elders in a home, locked away. We never want that to happen to us when we get old, so we don't want to follow your cultural norms. But straight up beating kids, right? Beating kids badly. They say, oh, kids are normal kids. It happened to me. When I was a kid, it happened to me. Look how I turned out. I'm now a teacher. Very respectable profession. Not like here. Teacher there. Well paid and esteemed. This was a huge dilemma for us, right? So this is one of the things that got us thinking about. I heard my wife one time goes to teach her music class. And so she's teaching. They had so one interesting kind of Uganda, I call it the colonial hangover. They have a very British curriculum. And so all the kids who study music study a lot of Western music. Beethoven, they call Beethoven, and other pillars of Western music. And I taught literature actually, and they also, we had to read all these obscure British novels that I never read in high school. Thomas Hardy, how many of you guys read Thomas Hardy in high school? Not really in our, that's an important book, got to read it if you go to college. And so my wife, was teaching, and 3 kids ditched her class. Your class size would be 45, 50 kids jammed in a room. No books or anything. And 3 kids ditched. And so this one, the assistant principal walks by. He's like, hey, how's it going? She's like, good. I just don't know where these 3 boys are. I'm going to go ahead and start my lesson, but I just was wondering where they were. Because everyone lives there. It's not like a commuter school. Everyone lives there because you can't get a local high school. There's not enough people who can afford school in a given area to support a high school. So the kids live in dorms. The guy goes, gets the kids out of the dormitory. They were there washing their pants or something. Brings them over in front of the whole class and beats them. Really bad. My wife is traumatized. Oh, I shouldn't have told on them. She's they're looking at her and she's like, I'm so sorry. And so we kind of were facing this dilemma. The main thing we were there to do was build peace. And this fundamental practice of Ugandan society we felt was not peaceable. And was going to create a society rife with violence. And so we started really thinking deeply about this. What is it about Ugandan society that's so dangerous?